Shadow Hack. Chapter 261, Battle Sage and Jing. At this moment, Li Yunmu didn't know that the most outstanding people of this generation of War God Temple were talking about him. Right then, he was shocked by another event. How can that be? Just as he walked out of the flying palace, he witnessed an extremely shocking scene. On the platform in front of him, among the 6 characters representing the 6 continents, Battle Sage Vega was also present. How can there be 2 Battle Sage Vegas? Filled with shock, he hastily turned around towards the black-clothed person behind him. If the person standing atop was the real Battle Sage Vega, then how could the person by his side be Battle Sage Vega as well? Can she be a fake? Li Yunmu was convinced that the Battle Sage Vega standing on the platform was the real one, since he couldn't believe that the powerful people there wouldn't notice a fake. Then, wouldn't it mean that the one by his side he didn't dare to think anymore? You don't need to be confused. The person on the platform is undoubtedly Her Majesty, and so am I. Battle Sage Vega's faint voice echoed in Li Yunmu's ears. How? Li Yunmu didn't possess the ability to pass the sound only to a person's ear, so he could only reveal a suspicious expression. The entire world knows that Battle Sage Vega, but no one knows about this one. Actually, Battle Sage Vega possesses 2 bodies, and I am the other one. You can consider me Battle Sage Vega, but can also call me by my name, Battle Sage and Jing 1, Battle Sage Vega said in a faint voice that only he could hear. No, that wasn't right, this was actually Battle Sage and Jing. Li Yunmu had never known that Battle Sage Vega had 2 bodies. She had surprisingly divided herself into 2 parts. Li Yunmu didn't know what sort of method she had used, but he was certain that he shouldn't pry into her many secrets. He knew that since the other party had trusted him with such an important secret, this meant that he stood on the same side as her. White Vega, Dark Vega. Li Yunmu kept muttering these 2 names in his heart. Bai Yu was the true name of Battle Sage Vega, however, she was previously just an ordinary girl who made a living by weaving clothes. When her life changed, she took the title of Battle Sage Vega. As if authenticating something, Jing suddenly emitted a formidable pressure. She was standing by Li Yunmu's side in black clothes, and at that moment, all the people on Black Dragon Island were suddenly attacked by an enormous pressure exuded by her. People bearing the brunt of that attack were the group of scattered fluxers standing at the front, after which came the group of people from different powers, which had many flux sages. One after other, all of their expressions changed, and they fiercely retreated. From Li Yunmu's point of view, it was as if a tide of people had been forcefully pushed back several tens of meters by a formless pressure. The onlookers watched this scene with cold sweat pouring down their backs. What a formidable and domineering might! Li Yunmu hadn't been attacked by the pressure exerted by Battle Sage Vega, but his heart was still beating a quick tempo. He had met White Vega previously, and compared to her, Dark Vega was actually much more terrifying. Sure enough, all the people sitting atop the platform couldn't remain seated and stood up in astonishment. Chao Tiansek's sect master suddenly clasped his hands and said with an unsightly expression, "This junior wonders how to address this senior. My family name is An and my real name is Jing, I belong to the mysterious Li sect," Dark Vega said faintly to all the pinnacle characters standing atop the platform. The mysterious Li sect. Instantly, the expression of Chao Tiansek's sect master greatly changed. When others heard Dark Vega's voice, their expressions also changed swiftly. They hadn't expected that the instant the continental battle began, the mysterious Li sect would make its appearance. According to rumors, it didn't even exist, but now no one could believe this nonsense. Even Chao Tiansek's sect master didn't dare to believe it. This time, the mysterious Li sect had sent a quasi-deity, and the formidable pressure exerted by her had even caused the expressions of many powers and sects masters to change. This person was a powerhouse even among quasi-deities. So it is mysterious Li sect's Her Ladyship and Jing. I request you to join us on this platform, Battle Sage Vega, who was representing the central continent, said from the platform. The quasi-deity level characters standing above the platform, one after another, made an inviting gesture. As for Chao Tiansek's sect master and other sect masters, since they were domain sages, they could only stand in awe of her and didn't have the qualifications to invite her. Clearly, the pressure exerted by Battle Sage and Jing had made it clear that only the 9 battle sages on the platform could treat her as equals. Those who hadn't become quasi-deities couldn't even raise their heads in front of her. Battle Sage Anjing's voice passed by Li Yunmu's ear once again. You needn't be anxious, freely participate in the continental battle. I will clear all your suspicions after you return, and by you will dispel all your doubts. The next instant, Battle Sage Anjing's figure disappeared. When she reappeared, was already standing on the platform, near the group of the high and mighty people. Right then, the announcer stated loudly, from mysterious Li sect, her ladyship Jing has arrived. At this moment, the fluxers underneath the platform were already in commotion because of Li sect's sudden move. Even if Li Yunmu didn't understand many things right then, there was no need to worry about it. He walked forward in large strides, leading Li Yun and the others. They all entered the area where the major clans and powers were present. Li Yunmu had now become aware of the true law of the 6 continents. If you are not a quasi-deity, then you are just an ant. Even if you are a senior domain sage with a powerful domain, in front of a genuine quasi-deity, you can barely look at them and nothing more. The sect masters of all the sects, including Chao Tian sect and Unfettered sect, could only consider themselves as juniors in front of a quasi-deities and leave the seats for them. If the 6 domain sages dispatched by the 6 transcending powers weren't representing 6 supreme powers, they also wouldn't have gained any seats. At this moment, Li Yunmu also understood why Ling Shuang had been so calm. Sword sect was only an ordinary sect, but it had Sword Sage, which was more than sufficient. After today, there wouldn't be anyone who harbored suspicions about the existence of Li sect, and only Li Yunmu would know the truth of the matter. The first appearance of the 8 disciples of Li sect also helped to dispel many theory about Li sect being an illusion. As people thought about that, Li Yunmu led his shadows into the crowd, with the 6 followers guarding them. Chapter 262, Lin Yuerou's Warning. Li Yunmu sensed many unfamiliar and strange as well as extremely familiar gazes falling upon him from all 4 directions. He looked in the direction of the somewhat familiar people. Ling Shuang had come long ago, and she was standing with Sword Sect's group. When their gazes met, the 2 of them nodded faintly to each other in greeting. From the group of Chao Tian sect, Yeching also greeted him with a faint smile. This was due to bother the matter of the transcending sage tool and because of the appearance of Li sect's battle sage and Jing. Yeching's attitude towards Li Yunmu had changed greatly. He appeared quite friendly on the surface, yet Li Yunmu was certain he was sneering on the inside. When people discovered that Li Yunmu and Yeching were on friendly terms, they were instantly baffled. Mammoth Barbarian Wahang's eyes were like 2 intense rays of lights, which were filled with battle intent and aimed straight at Li Yunmu. Clearly, he still wanted a rematch regarding their previous collision. This time, Li Yunmu was participating in the continental battle and would no longer have the advantage of superior position and forbidden weapons. Thus, Wahang was thinking about thrashing him once and for all. There were many other bizarre gazes as well. Li Yunmu felt as if a shock of electricity had passed through his heart. He was aware of all of those who had come here to participate in the continental battle. Their treatment towards him wasn't anything special, though, since all of them considered each other as rivals. He also met gazes with the number 1 person of the 5th dimension, Zhihanbei, for the first time. At the death zone last time, he had only dispatched 2 mist fiends, so there hadn't been any real fight between the 2 of them. I'm quite interested to see how far you will go in the continental battle. These were the only words Zhihanbei said towards Li Yunmu. The pair of Mantian and Hai Yu also stood among the people. They were sizing up Li Yunmu while he was also doing the same towards them, fully aware that they were the two most powerful flux disciples of this generation among the evolved humans. Suddenly, Li Yunmu moved his gaze and was left in astonishment. Li Zii stood nearby. He hadn't expected to see her here. According to reason, she couldn't have come to such a place, given her strength. Li Zi's gaze contained a hint of pleasant surprise while looking at Li Yunmu. He nodded slightly towards her in greeting. At some point of time, this fellow student from Lucky Wind Great Courtyard had surprisingly joined Snow Temple, which only accepts female disciples. She had probably come today with Snow Temple to get a piece of action and increase her experience. Soon, Li Yunmu took note of a complex gaze directed his way. He turned to look at the person and saw Tang Ruokan of Heavenly Dragon family, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Tang Ruokan had been one of the 10 most powerful newcomer flux disciples of the Heavenly Cloud City, but after so much time, his brilliance was just like the inconspicuous grains of sand on the ground of Black Dragon Island beneath Li Yunmu's feet. Tang Ruokan's gaze was filled with complicated emotions, and so was Li Yunmu's, when he recalled the matters of the past 6 months. He then saw another acquaintance within the group of Heavenly Dragon family, Luo Jin. It was a surprise to see him having joined this family. When the two of them saw each other this time, Luo Jin wasn't acting arrogant as before. Facing Li Yunmu, he tried his best to avoid meeting his gaze. The world really changes too quickly. Naturally, this also applied to how Li Yunmu had changed. Just like Li Zii, the other former students of Lucky Wind Great Courtyard had all went their own ways and joined some power. Big Xiong, Crooked Teeth, and Brother Thin hadn't come, and neither had Lunuja. Seeing this, Li Yunmu's mood slightly dampened. However, at this time, Lin Yuerou hesitated for a moment and then walked to him from the side of Blue Cloud Sect. Because of the heavenly transformation, Heavenly Cloud City's situation has stabilized, more or less. I've been appointed as the substitute city lord. When she came to Li Yunmu's side, it immediately attracted many astonished gazes. According to rumors, the stunning beauty Lin Yuerou had some complicated relation with Li Yunmu. At this moment, everyone finally obtained proof regarding these rumors. It was said that before dying, the old city master of Heavenly Cloud City had betrothed Lin Yuerou, who was at temporal layer, to Li Yunmu. Now, it seemed like this information wasn't false. So the promise to me is also forgotten. Li Yunmu forced a bitter smile. The interest groups hadn't expected that because of the heavenly transformation, the situation of Heavenly Cloud City would be instantly reversed. However, Li Yunmu was aware of this information beforehand. As it happened, all the powers in Heavenly Cloud City had chosen sides with the violent undercurrent surging around, but because of the heavenly transformation, a commotion was caused on all the 6 continents. It swiftly stabilized Heavenly Cloud City's situation, and with the support of Blue Cloud Sect, Lin Yuerou had steadily settled into the position of substitute city lord. The conflict was settled before it had even started. The promise of a citadel's earnings to be given to Li Yunmu was also forgotten. Regardless of whether it was Li Yunmu or the powers of Heavenly Cloud City, all of them wanted to exert their full strength and play a role in this continental battle. Yes, but now that my control on Heavenly Cloud City has become firm, I believe I can achieve that. All the powers of Heavenly Cloud City have joined together to push out one contestant. Her name is Lin Min. Lin Yuerou paused for a moment, then added, she is a person of our Heavenly Cloud City, her talent and strength isn't bad, and she can be trusted. I hope at the necessary time, you will show some consideration to her. Li Yunmu nodded, then suddenly asked, what about Lin Qingyang? Already dead. He died inside the Tower of Glory. Lin Yuerou sighed lightly. He died because of his own jealousy, believing that he could also clear the 25th level of the Tower of Glory at that time. Hearing this, Li Yunmu remained silent. Lin Qingyang had surprisingly died. Apparently, he had secretly ran off to the Tower of Glory to challenge the 25th level. What a pity, Heavenly Cloud City's city lord's son had no self-awareness. A person who had built his cultivation using rare resources, how could he think to surpass the 25th level? If not for his father, Li Yunmie wouldn't have even looked at him directly. I will go. You be careful. This time's continental battle is different, be cautious of divine religion. After whispering the last few words into his ear, Lin Yuerou returned back to Blue Cloud Sect. Li Yunmie paused for a moment, not knowing how to respond to her. He watched her departing figure and suddenly sensed that in the past few months he hadn't seen her. This goddess of heavenly Cloud City had surprisingly become more powerful. Host, given the power emitted by her, she should have entered the Nirvana layer, the system aptly told him. Li Yunmie immediately understood the situation. It was no wonder that she could grasp the control of heavenly Cloud City's general situation now that her strength had increased. A young female entering Nirvana layer before 30 years of age, being just half a step away from the sage level, this was extremely significant. With the Blue Cloud Sect supporting her as well as the commotion caused by the heavenly transformation, it should have allowed her to grasp the control of heavenly Cloud City. As the time of the continental battle's start drew closer, more and more fluxers and powers from all sides entered the Black Dragon Island. On this day, the Black Dragon Island became the center of attention of the entire world. Those who didn't have the qualifications to be present were using online platforms to watch the live broadcast to experience the unprecedentedly majestic act. In the last few hours, many clans, powers, flux sages, and even quasi-deities descended on the island. Of the 4 barbarian kings of Desolate Continent, 3 had already arrived. Mammoth Barbarian King, Northern Barbarian King, and Tower Barbarian King. Only the Lion Barbarian King hadn't come. From among the battle sage powerhouses of the Central Continent, 3 had come: Sword Sect's Sword Sage, Snow Temple's Snow Sage, and Blue-Green Temple's Blue-Green Sage. The battle sages of the Northern Continent included Zhongshan family's Zhongshan Sage, Extreme Cloud Villa's Extreme Cloud Sage. Southern Continent's 3 ocean cities had sent 1 battle sage each. Enormous Whale City's Enormous Whale Sage, Python City's Golden Python Sage, as well as Wave Moon City's Wave Moon Sage. Southern Continent's power structure was quite unique. There was a firm conviction in this continent that ruling power and transcending power was the same. Higher dimensional continent wasn't inhabited by ordinary people, but there were many powerful people who lived there. This time, 3 quasi-deities from the 3 major clans had come. One of whom was Lu Buletin's Buletin clan. If the 6 quasi-deities representing the ruling powers of each continent and battle sage and Jing were added, then presently there were 27 quasi-deities on the Black Dragon continent. As for domain sages, their numbers surpassed those of battle sages. Most of them were masters of clans and other powers of the 6 continents, with a few scattered rogue battle sages. In this manner, the most powerful people of Earth were gathered together for the first time. Finally, at the auspicious time, this year's continental battle officially began. Chapter 263, Great Changes in the Regulations and Rules. This year's continental battle will be completely different from the previous years. The rules and regulations have been changed. The first test, which is known as the Corporeal Body Strength Test, will now begin the continental battle, declared one of the 6 representatives of the Human Alliance in simple words, without speaking any nonsense. However, everyone including Li Yunmie was left stunned. Within a short while, all sorts of surprised and astonished cries rang out from the crowd. There were only a few people who appeared to have come prepared. In fact, the people on the Black Dragon Island soon became aware that the rules and regulations of this year's continental battle had been changed greatly. Only once all of them were announced did everyone understand the meaning behind them. If spoken truthfully, with this amount of change, this was hardly the continental battle at all. In the previous continental battles, as the name implied, Flux disciples from all around the earth would fight against each other to determine the top 10 most powerful Flux disciples. In fact, the top 10 most powerful people of Heavenly Cloud City had been created based on the continental battle. A capital city's top 10 most formidable people, above which were a king city's top 10 most formidable people, which were surpassed by a continent's top 10. Only after reaching this list would a person obtain the qualifications to represent their home continent in the continental battle and battle against the top 10 most formidable people of the other 5 continents. After battling heavily for several rounds, the final 10 people would obtain the supreme glory of being called one of the top 10 most powerful Flux disciples on Earth. Naturally, this title came with the supply of resources and great wealth as a reward established by the Human Alliance. This was the original meaning behind the continental battle. Its aim was to nurture the 10 people with the highest potential. However, the rules and regulations had been greatly changed now. In fact, words like greatly changed couldn't actually pertain the real meaning of what had happened, because people now discovered that apart from the name being the same, this continental battle had nothing in common with its predecessors, be it in meaning or purpose. When the Human Alliance concisely announced the latest rules, the entire Black Dragon Island was shocked, and the people watching the live broadcast issued cries of incredulity. But the authority arranging this year's continental battle was so mighty that it wasn't easy to oppose it. Even if someone wasn't willing to accept and follow the new rules, they couldn't do anything about it, just silently bow their heads. Even if an idiot saw the people on the platform who were behind the new rules, they would immediately understand that these rules weren't something they could change. There were more than 20 quasi-deities up there. Many Flux sages had appeared on the Black Dragon Island, and other people who were vying for supremacy had gathered here from all of the 6 continents on Earth. Everyone was clear that the reason behind the great changes in the rules this year was because of the heavenly transformation. Now, those among Flux disciples who had cleared the 70th level of the Tower of Glory will automatically gain the minimum qualifications to participate. That's the first test. After giving some time for people to adjust, the Alliance representative immediately declared that the first test had started. With his words, he had actually removed any chance of participation for people who believed themselves to be extremely formidable but who hadn't cleared the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. With a wave of his hand, an enormous energy cover sprang up in the empty space underneath the platform. This protective energy cover resembled a huge bowl which had been kept inverted over the large Earth, taking up roughly 100 meters. Immediately, 2 personnel from the Human Alliance rushed toward it and swiftly built 2 small transfer channels high above the ground, opposite of the energy cover. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. Now, every person who possesses the minimum qualifications will have their name called out in a random order. Everyone whose name is called out will enter the energy cover through the transfer channel and immediately advance to the first test. This energy cover suppresses one's flux energy, so participants will have to rely upon the strength of their flesh to survive. This is an extremely dangerous test. All participants will now be given 30 seconds to think about whether they want to participate or not. Once a person enters the energy cover, whether they live or die, that will completely depend upon them. 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, 2, 1, begin. The first contestant, Gu Tiancheng, the disciple of Snow Shark Sect, from one of the 3 great ocean cities, Enormous Whale City. I request you to enter the energy cover within 30 seconds. If you don't enter in 30 seconds, you will be automatically disqualified. The 3 great ocean cities of the sea gods' people belonged to the southern continent. However, the structure of power among sea gods' people was completely different from other continents. Only the ordinary people lived on land in the southern continent. Those who had awakened flux energy could enter the 3 great cities established at the bottom of the ocean. Thus, the people of the southern continent viewed the 3 great ocean cities as the holy cities of the sea god, and so people living in the 3 ocean cities were announced using the name of the city they resided in rather than the continent. Thus, when people heard that the first contestant was someone who belonged to the 3 ocean cities, they knew that this person was an evolved human from the southern continent. Very quickly, a gigantic stopwatch appeared above the platform. 30 seconds began to pass quickly. At this instant, regardless of whether it was Fluxers present on the Black Dragon Island or those who were watching the live broadcast, all of them believed that Gu Tiancheng was breaking out in cold sweat. This unlucky Gu Tiancheng, who had become the first person to be chosen for the test, really had bad luck. No one knew what this test was, or anything specific about it, like what was required to pass it. Besides, the majority of sea gods' people's combat strength rested upon the sea beasts they could summon. Now then, with the suppression on the flux energy, how could the sea gods' people have any combat strength remaining? Gu Tiancheng hesitated for a long time, thinking about it. Suddenly, he walked forward from the group of enormous whale city and asked in a loud voice, "Can the sea beasts be summoned by the sea god people in the energy cover?" Yes, this is classified as an innate ability which is different from flux energy and hence isn't restricted. But if the sea beast cannot fight on land, then it is basically trash. You still have 13 seconds left to think about it, the Alliance representative quickly answered, resolving the problem. "I choose to renounce." In the final few seconds, Gu Tiancheng chose to renounce. After his words, a huge commotion rose up behind him. "Crap, this isn't fair, it's completely disastrous for sea gods' people. I oppose it. Yes, this is discrimination against sea gods' people, this continental battle has lost its original meaning and purpose." Gu Tiancheng's renouncement had become the final nail in the coffin of other Fluxers' tolerance and patience. Chapter 264, Nightmare Level Difficulty. Almost all the sea gods' people who were paying attention to the continental battle, as well as some humans from the other 5 continents, went crazy. With such a grand competition having such an enormous flaw in its regulations, was there still meaning to the continental battle? Though the fierce protest wasn't just because due to one reason. Among the protesters, there were several angry Flux Masters as well. In previous continental battles, Flux disciples were just one group of participants. Transcendent Flux Masters, Temporal Flux Masters as well as Nirvana Flux Masters were also divided into 3 groups. Then, the top 10 most powerful people were determined for each of these groups. But this year's continental battle surprisingly didn't include the latter 3 groups as contestants. The Flux disciples had become the focus of the entire world, so Flux Masters were naturally angry and resentful. However, what was the use of their anger? The Alliance refused to pay any attention to them. They simply declared that Gu Tiancheng had forfeited, thus losing the qualifications to proceed with the continental battle. Those people were extremely powerful, completely heartless, and irrefutable. At that instant, everyone had a sudden sensation that this continental battle was going to be completely different. However, since the representative of the southern continent, Ocean Emperor, sitting on the platform, remained completely silent, the sea gods' people also began to gradually quiet down. This was the first time that even a quasi-deity couldn't influence the rules in a competition, for it had too many serious implications. This continental battle surpassed the level of normal competitions. The majority of people then became aware of this point. The second contestant is Fan Zhanshan from the Qingshan tribe of higher dimensional continent. You have 30 seconds to choose whether you want to proceed with the test, the representative declared once again with cold face. An enormous stopwatch appeared above the platform, counting down the seconds. This time, Fan Zhanshan of the higher dimensional continent didn't disappoint the people and quickly entered the single-person transfer channel outside the energy cover. The next instant, he was transferred inside. He would be isolated during the whole fight, which implied that he would receive no assistance from the outside world. Whether he lived or died would depend solely on him alone. Reportedly, the energy cover was a domain sage level cover, which meant that even if a domain sage attacked it, they wouldn't be able to damage it. Not to mention that there were also more than 20 battle sages, barbarian kings, and ocean emperor present on the stage. At this instant, after Fan Zhanshan had been transferred inside, the other transfer channel opposite him was also activated, and one by one, several meter-tall dimensional beasts began to be transferred over. When the image of these dimensional monsters began to clear up, allowing everyone outside to see what kind of beasts they were, everyone present was left astonished. These are barbarous devil claws. My god, it's said that among the rainbow-level dimensional beasts, they're the fiercest and cruelest. Yet, apart from king-class dimensional beasts, they're the most formidable among the many dimensional beasts. Many people couldn't stop fear from rising in their hearts once they saw the dimensional beasts coming out of the transfer channel one after another. Barbarous devil claws were considered as one of the beasts which could make a fluxer flee just at the mere sight of them. But right then, 5 of them had come out of the transfer channel. Furthermore, the Alliance prohibited the contestants from using flux energy within the energy cover. This was just like leaving no path of survival for the participants. Only at this point did people realize the enormous disparity between fluxers who had cleared the 70th level of the Tower of Glory and normal rainbow crystal fluxers. The majority of people believed that Fan Zhanshan was toast. Once fluxers lost their flux energy, could they still be called fluxers? However, Fan Zhanshan didn't despair and took action. He stamped heavily on the ground and shot forward like an artillery shell, like a tiger entering a pack of wolves. He began to rain heavy punches on the barbarous devil claws. The flesh of the dimensional beasts felt like an extremely thick tire. Pang! 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 A series of explosive sounds echoed from the energy cover. The 5 barbarous devil claws, who appeared to be starving, pounced towards Fan Zhanshan in a crazed manner, wishing to tear him to shreds. However, Fan Zhanshan's footwork and 5 senses were extremely keen. It was as if he had grown eyes all over his body. He didn't even need to turn around and always kept moving forward, evading every attack from the 5 barbarous devil claws. Bang! 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 Soon, the entire area inside the energy cover was filled with the sounds of the intense battle between Fan Zhanshan and the 5 barbarous devil claws. These dimensional beasts were worthy of being called one of the strongest rainbow crystal layer dimensional beasts. They were incomparably tyrannical, and even if Fan Zhanshan had landed more than 100 punches on their bodies, they still had enough energy to fight him off. After a quarter of an hour had passed, Fan Zhanshan was breathing heavily. His movements and attack speed began to slow down. The 2 terrifying claws of the barbarous devil claws had almost ripped him apart several times by now. But his willpower was still firm, and he kept launching punches on the dimensional beasts. He can be regarded as pretty good. His physical body is also quite alright. He is quite lacking in terms of endurance and power, but his willpower is quite firm. He can be considered as a material worth nurturing, assessed Glacier Battle Sage, who was representing the northern continent with a hint of admiration in his eyes. He is still alright. Although he doesn't have an enormous offensive power and isn't very proficient in fighting against a group, his battle awareness barely meets the standard, higher dimensional continents Battle Sage agreed, nodding. If these kind of evaluations by the 2 battle sages were heard by outsiders paying attention to this battle, they would most likely immediately cause an uproar. What was still alright? Barely meeting the standards? The combat strength and battle skills displayed by Fan Zhanshan had given a fright to most of the spectators. Especially the fluxers who had also reached Rainbow Crystal Layer. They gave up all hope at this instant. Was that person still a human? Was this sort of combat strength expected from a Rainbow Crystal fluxers? Let alone 5 barbarous devil claws, if they encountered even one, being able to escape with their lives intact would already be a giant fortune for them. However, they now discovered that this world's standard was much different. It filled the majority of Rainbow Crystal fluxers with complete despair. It must be known that Fan Zhanshan wasn't even using his flux energy. Losing the flux energy could be considered as losing the most reliable source of power for the fluxers. In fact, most of the skills as well as secrets techniques which a person possessed would be rendered useless. However, the person from the higher dimensional continent continued to hold on. After a long time had passed, the last barbarous devil claw fell after Fan Zhanshan had punched its hard times. By this time, Fan Zhanshan was covered in blood, both from the beasts he'd killed and his own injuries, gained in the second half of the fight when his movement began to dull slowly. But regardless of what was said, he had prevailed in his first battle, shocking everyone around the world who was watching this test. In this world, such a terrifying new generation had been hidden. What people had originally called impossible was accomplished by him. Many people were left speechless by the huge shock. This Fan Zhanshan is too formidable, to the extent that I can't even describe with words. Is this the level one must reach before attempting to clear the 70th level of the Tower of Glory? Chapter 265, Demon Appears. This higher dimensional continent's Fan Zhanshan can't be human. He seems even more formidable than people like Man Tian and Zihanbei. Just by relying on his physical strength, he killed 5 barbarous devil claws. This really is inhumane. Regardless of whatever is said, he certainly surpasses humans. He is simply a monster. Ferocious, too ferocious. I didn't expect a person without any fame to be so ferocious. What crouching tigers and hidden dragons! I've heard that there are no one weaklings among Fluxers of the higher dimensional continent, but I didn't believe it. Now, though, I'm somewhat convinced. Fan Zhanshan, who was from the Qingshan clan of the higher dimensional continent, became famous with this one battle. His name hadn't appeared in public before and no one knew who he was, but after this one battle, most of the Fluxers of the 6 continents now knew his name. Many people even thought that this Fan Zhanshan was even more formidable than people like Zihanbei. However, the people who were thinking this way only displayed their ignorance and limited experience by doing so. The first test continued, and after the first contestant, the second came, then the third 13th. Very few people renounced, but the number of those who succeeded in passing the first test also wasn't high. When the turn for the 13th contestant came and the Alliance representative announced his name as Coiling Tiger from the Desolate Continent, all the spectators watching the test exploded. Coiling Tiger, he's Coiling Dragon Barbarian King's son. It's said that among the 13 sons of Coiling Dragon Barbarian King, Coiling Tiger is the youngest, most talented, and had merged with the most powerful bloodline. If someone asked who among the 13 sons of Coiling Dragon Barbarian King are the most likely to succeed him, then it would certainly be this Coiling Tiger. Yes, someone from the Desolate Continent exposed once that this Coiling Tiger had challenged Man Tian when he was 13 years old. It's said that the battle that time had lasted for 3 days and nights until Coiling Tiger finally lost because he was too young. Yes, I also heard about this matter. Coiling Tiger now is 15 years old. In the 2 years since that battle, he only became more formidable. I wonder, between Coiling Tiger and that Fan Zhanshan from just a moment ago, who would be more formidable? When Barbarian King's son Coiling Tiger took the stage, everyone's expectations rose up. If this corporeal body strength test was a disaster for Sea God's people, then for the people of Desolate Continent, it was a heaven-bestowed gift. After the people of the Desolate Continent awakened flux energy, they would merge with an innate bloodline of the outside world and thus temper their blood vessels to become even more formidable. The strength of their physical bodies would then surpass that of people from the other 5 continents. Although Coiling Tiger's name wasn't as famed and outstanding as Man Tian's, since he was Coiling Dragon Barbarian King's youngest and most outstanding son, online viewers produced all sorts of information related to him. Because of it, everyone discovered that this 15-year-old Coiling Tiger was surprisingly so valiant that he had challenged Man Tian while he was only a minor. Swiftly, under everyone's gazes, Coiling Tiger entered the energy cover where his opponents were the same 5 barbarous devil claws. Yuerou. The next instant, Coiling Tiger's aura transformed and became extremely threatening, like that of a devil tiger. The 5 barbarous devil claws became so frightened that they shivered, no longer able to pounce on him. Rubbish, completely useless, just hurry and die. Blue veins appeared on the body of Coiling Tiger, who was wrapped in a rich aura like that of a devil tiger. He pounced towards the 5 barbarous devil claws who had already lost all fighting spirit. He started a bloodbath, and in less than a minute, the 5 beasts were dismembered, their internal organs spread all over the ground. The audience was so quiet you could hear a needle drop to the ground. Was this really a 15-year-old? Were his enemies really the same barbarous devil claws who were known for their savageness? Everyone on the scene couldn't believe their eyes. Just moments ago they had been thinking that Fan Zhanshan was comparable to people like Man Tian or Zi Hanbei, but Coiling Dragon's actions broke their delusions. What bulls asterisk at Fan Zhanshan, ignorant people had surprisingly thought that he who had barely crossed the control line was equal to the greatest among the Overlord characters. How can this be? Most of the people were left dumbstruck, including the majority of Rainbow Crystal Fluxers. Fan Zhanshan dealing with 5 barbarous devil claws when his flux energy was suppressed and he couldn't use any of the flux skills was already considered quite unbelievable. This had seemed like an impossible feat for all the spectators. However, once Coiling Dragon appeared on stage, their worldview was torn to shreds. All those who were watching this test became aware of what the title of Overlord truly implied. They also realized that the reason why Fan Zhanshan hadn't entered the ranks of Overlords wasn't because he didn't have sufficient fame or powerful background, but because compared to people like Coiling Tiger, he was weak, extremely weak. Despite this, Fan Zhanshan's previous performance had already surpassed the imagination of ordinary people. Collapsed, my worldview has collapsed completely. Heavens, are these people still humans? How can they be living under the same sky as me? These were the words at the bottom of the heart of one Rainbow Crystal Fluxer, and they perfectly portrayed the innermost feelings of countless Flux disciples. If it wasn't because the continental battle had been affected by the heavenly transformation, they wouldn't have even known that the world where they were living was so terrifying. This Coiling Tiger's strength is probably sufficient to kill a Flux Master who had just entered the 6th dimension. That's just too monstrous. After Coiling Tiger passed the test, other contestants entered the stage. These people who had automatically cleared the 70th level indeed deserved to be known as unhindered Fluxers. Although people still kept renouncing occasionally, increasingly more participants made the spectators realize what the existences named unhindered Fluxers were. Despite losing their flux energy as well as all the flux energy battle skills and even their flux energy crystal armor, after formulating a battle strategy after doing their research, 7 out of the next 10 contestants passé. Although ordinary fluxers couldn't imagine passing this test, in the eyes of this group of people, this test wasn't that difficult. Apart from sea gods people or those with very weak flesh, the challenge raised by the 5 barbarous devil claws was passed by others using all sorts of methods. 79th contestant, demon from one of 3 great ocean cities. After yet another contestant passed the test with a daunting experience but without any mishaps, the Alliance's official announced the name of next participant. The name attracted the gazes of many who were present, and they stared over, during the 30 seconds of preparation. Chapter 266, Transformed Barbarian Yue. Demon? Sea God's Demon. When did he obtain the qualifications to enter the continental battle? Wasn't he ranked 12th among halted fluxers? Even the 3rd-ranked Nangang Gongzi couldn't obtain the qualifications but he did. Oh? Isn't this demon one of Li Yunmu's followers? How could he possibly have the strength to participate in the continental battle? Many experienced and knowledgeable people found it unfathomable. The rookie Li Yunmu had been cultivating for less than half a year, but his strength had already reached the level of overlords. All of this was extremely abnormal. But presently, the mother Fastarisker on the stage is telling that not only had Li Yunmu obtained the qualifications for the continental battle, but even his follower had obtained a spot. Reckless. Seems Li Yunmu had spent all his reserves to support his follower into crossing the 70th level, wanting to get some piece of the continental battle? Let's take a look, perhaps it is some other person named Demon. However, when Demon walked out from behind Li Yunmu and entered the transfer channel without saying anything, many people were startled. It wasn't another person, but really a follower of Li Yunmu. At this time, when all the people of the world saw this scene on their online networks, heard the comments, they understood Demon's situation. Li Yunmu is just courting disaster for his subordinate. If he had allowed Li Qinghong to participate, she might have had a chance to survive, but he had surprisingly asked a person of C to participate in this strength test. Most of the people thought that Li Yunmu was being too excessive. Under everyone's gazes, Demon entered the energy cover. The opposite transfer channel flickered and the 5 barbarous devil claws were released. Demon then summoned a sea beast as per the innate ability of sea god's people, and it was a sea devil ape. There was no doubt that this creature was a very formidable sea beast, and it was even amphibious. But right now, it was faced with 5 barbarous devil claws. The audience had no hope for it, expecting to see Demon and his sea beast being torn to shreds by the 5 monstrous beasts. Before Demon became famous, he had mostly relied upon his sea devil ape. I wonder where he got the confidence to face the 5 barbarous devil claws. That's right, if his sea devil ape gets killed, then since he can't use his flux energy, even one barbarous devil claw would be enough to take his life. Has Li Yunmu gone crazy, ordering his follower into death? Many people were baffled while feeling sympathy for Demon at the same time. A halted fluxer with good strength had actually become someone's follower and lost all freedom, were forced to act according to his master's commands, who was ordering him to court death. The next instant, though, everyone discovered how wrong they were. The sea devil ape summoned by Demon approached the group of 5 barbarous devil claws quite bravely. And then, it didn't perish right away. How was that possible? Although it was an amphibious sea beast and was quite powerful, it was still impossible for the beast to fight 5 barbarous devil claws who were attacking it as a group. 1 against 5. It was impossible to win. However, the quasi-deities and other people on the platform could clearly see that the devil ape summoned by Demon was an evolved one. It's not an ordinary sea ape, it has awakened its bloodline, and that also to a relatively high level. This Li Yunmu, or perhaps it is the Li sect behind him, should have used some extremely effective secret technique to forcefully awaken the bloodlines of all their dimensional beasts. Battle Sage Jing, looks like your Li sect's foundation is quite profound. While people atop the platform were assessing the grade of the sea devil ape, an astonishing change occurred underneath the energy cover. When the sea devil ape was surrounded by the 5 beasts, both sides had entered a deadlock. No one could gain an advantage over the other. However, after Demon was done with chanting a secret technique, the sea devil ape began to change greatly. A layer of thick and sharp bristles appeared on its body, and it began to swell greatly. The sea devil ape was 3 meters tall at first, but now it changed into a genuine enormous sea devil which was 7 meters tall. The skin of this enormous sea devil was cyan and red, sprouting a layer of thick and sharp thorns which covered its entire body. The beast then lifted its lips in a growl-like motion, revealing 2 rows of sinister fangs. Ah, this is a Ghost King transformation. How did this sea devil ape cultivate the Ghost King body tempering methods of the Ghost Clan? The expressions of many flux sages and even experienced temporal and nirvana layer flux masters immediately changed. An amphibious sea devil ape was quite rare in itself. A sea devil ape which had awakened its bloodline was even rarer, even among 10,000s of its kind one such sea devil ape may not be found. But this was a sea devil ape which had awakened its bloodline and had evolved greatly while also possessing the comprehension close to that of humans. This was unprecedented, and this unprecedented sea devil ape had surprisingly cultivated an extraordinary body tempering secret method as well. This was neither seen nor heard of before. After unleashing the Demon King transformation, its strength increased by a huge margin, and the deadlock between the 2 sides was broken right away. The 7-meter-tall Ghost King sea beast grabbed a barbarous devil claw and took a bite, its sharp fangs going deep into the skin. The barbarous devil claw, which had tyrannical flesh, was instantly chewed and swallowed. This scene was absolutely terrifying and filled with even more blood, compared to when Coiling Tiger had ripped his opponents to shreds. After sensing the terrifying presence of the Ghost King sea devil ape, the other 4 barbarous devil claws began to flee in all directions. However, where could they escape in this energy cover which had a diameter of only 100 meters? In less than a few minutes, they were eaten by the Ghost King Sea Devil Ape. Eaten? That's right, they were food. This wasn't a test, rather a restaurant for the Sea Devil Ape. Demon waved a hand and sent back his Ghost King Sea Devil Ape. He then left the energy cover and returned to Li Yunmu's side, silently finding his place behind him. All the new stars on the Black Dragon Island sensed a formless pressure. Demon returning alive from the test was completely opposite to their expectations. What kind of bullshit was this? Even a mere follower of Li Yunmu had improved to this extent. Then what level had Li Yunmu himself matured to? Soon, an even more frightening fact came to light, which was that Demon wasn't an exception. When the turn for the 132nd contestant came, Barbarian Yu's name was called, and he appeared on stage. Once Barbarian Yu stepped onto the stage, he immediately attracted the attention of everyone. Another one of Li Yunmu's followers had appeared? Had all of his followers crossed the 70th level of the Tower of Glory secretly? Once the new Star Flux disciples thought of this, a chill ran down their backs. Weak, too weak. This sort of test is simply needless, Barbarian Yu said, imitating the tone of Coiling Tiger while shaking his head inwardly, the moment he stepped onto the stage. The next instant, the energy around him exploded, and his presence increased greatly. He pounced like a barbarous devil claw towards the true barbarous devil claws and went on a rampage, astonishing everyone. Rubbish, complete trash, just hurry and die. Chapter 267, The Meaning of the Title Overlord. At this moment, Barbarian Yu was even more devilish than barbarous devil claws and appeared to have gone completely berserk. Since he had merged with the bloodline of mist fiends which had been nurtured by divine blood, the fiend bloodline in his body was relatively pure. The formidable presence emitted from his body didn't lose to Coiling Tigers in the least. He pounced towards the beasts with a loud howl, and in the same way as Coiling Tiger, he shredded the 5 barbarous devil claw beasts. The entire process didn't last for more than 3 minutes. This contestant's degree of merging with his bloodline is quite good, but his battle skills can't compare to Coiling Tiger's. That's all right. At least in terms of flesh power, he is quite good. However, isn't this Barbarian Yu also Li Yunmu's follower? Quite strange. Some people on top of the platform were discussing this strange matter. Barbarian Yu's performance had barely attracted the attention of these people who stood at the top of pyramid. But unlike their light discussion, the people underneath were in an uproar, since the majority of people couldn't sense the disparity between Barbarian Yu and Coiling Tiger. Most only knew that once this person appeared on stage, he had imitated Coiling Tiger in every move when killing the beasts. Who is this Barbarian Yu? How can he be so fierce? Although Coiling Tiger was also just as fierce, but he is the most talented son of Barbarian King Coiling Dragon. Where did this Barbarian Yu jump out from, though? I haven't heard about him until today. This thought didn't belong to just one person. The main reason for this was that Barbarian Yu's fame hadn't been acknowledged by the masses and spread through the world. Yes, this person is also quite ferocious, it is like he is directly challenging Coiling Tiger. When Coiling Tiger, who had passed the test long ago, looked at Barbarian Yu successfully imitating his every movement, he narrowed his eyes and said, "Very good, I hope you'll have the strength to copy all my actions in the future as well." Coiling Tiger was an arrogant and proud person, and he was infuriated by this unknown person. But in this place filled with quasi-deities and flux sages, he could only control himself. Haha, regardless of whatever method you use, your daddy Lu will continue with it. Barbarian Yu wasn't scared. He was excited instead. After his strength had increased, he was desperately waiting for some event where he could confirm that everything that happened during the last month wasn't a dream. By this time, the commentators online had already shared the information about Barbarian Yu's previous achievements. When everyone looked through them, they discovered that although he wasn't exactly famous before, his strength had still been impressive. He had been the 18th ranked halted fluxer. But this list was already a has-been. With all the new stars rising in all the continents, this list had become outdated and inaccurate. Impossible, this barbarian Niu was only 18th among the halted Fluxers. Yes, a mere former 18th ranked halted Fluxer, but surprisingly he doesn't lose to Coiling Tiger by much. You all, quickly come and see, this person is also Li Yunmu's follower. Dang, this Li Yunmu really is something. 2 of his followers possess the qualifications for the continental battle. When everyone had investigated Barbarian Niu's information, it was all good. But once they checked and discovered that he was surprisingly a follower of Li Yunmu, everyone was shocked. Not only were the majority of people extremely shocked, even many second-rate organizations and families felt quite stifled at this moment. It must be known that these organizations had pretty impressive standings in the 6 continents, but even after gathering their entire strength, they might not be able to make sure that one of their members would cross the 70th level. But this Li Yunmu surprisingly had 2 followers who could obtain the qualifications for the continental battle. The test still continued. Soon, Jie, Zhanbei, Zhu Wuxin, Ling Shuang, and the others entered the stage one after another. These Overlord-level characters used actions to show people the meaning of the word Overlord. All of them cleared this round by getting rid of the 5 barbarous devil claws in less than 3 minutes without any exception. All of them stood above the others, clearly displaying that even if their flux energy was suppressed, it didn't mean that they were powerless. Formidable, really formidable. They indeed deserve the title of Overlord. Yes, when I saw Fan Zhanshan killing the 5 devil claws, I felt it was unimaginable, but I had never thought that real overlords would be so terrifying. I have to accept that they are simply abnormal. Wrong, they aren't abnormal, but rather you are too inexperienced, that's all. You're old fart, what inexperienced? When the 5 barbarous devil claws had just come out at the start, didn't everyone think that this test couldn't be passed? And you **ing hypocrite, I remember you also said something like that, or do you want to me turn over your recording? As many new stars appeared, the ordinary people on the online platform as well as numerous Fluxers had their worldviews demolished again and again by these new stars. Who is this Gea? How can he be so terrifying? I don't know what methods he used, but the 5 barbarous devils didn't even last a minute. Zhanbei does deserve to be known as the most powerful person in the 5th dimension. Even if the ranking has become outdated, no one has yet been able to surpass him. He only used 5 punches to blow away the 5 barbarous devil claws. Such an amount of flesh power is really astonishing. In a short time, once overlords appeared on the stage, they surpassed the performances of others, dulling their brilliance. But even in front of overlords, some new stars were bound to remain shining brightly. A person from the northern continent who had been cultivating bitterly and was unknown to people before suddenly took action, stunning everyone. Even people like Li Yunmu and Mantian etched his name, Fan Kong, into their minds. A female disciple who was a rogue fluxer coming from the depths of a mountain range in the higher dimensional continent also was an unknown. But once she used a knife-throwing skill, she gave a fright to everyone. Even the people atop the platform noted down her name, which was Zhao Mei. Later, a 40-year-old person used archery to let everyone know that arrows shot with great strength could be terrifying even within a small area. Almost all of his arrows hit monsters' weak points, as if they were shot from a sniper rifle. This person was known as Yang Qinggan, and he was clearly an older Flux disciple. He was a person who had been stuck in the Flux disciple realm for many years, but he wasn't a halted Fluxer because his lack of advancement was due to his low aptitude, not outside forces. But no one dared to belittle this old man who was stuck in the Flux disciple realm. Soon, Blade Overlord Lin Jian stepped onto the stage under countless strange gazes. Chapter 268, Yue and Xie Qianxue. Lin Jian was extremely calm and composed, but he didn't try to show off. He was a man with a blade. Although he couldn't use any flux energy, the blade intent emitted by his body was incredibly swift. Every strike of his was filled with terrifying blade intent and keen insight, attacking the joints of the barbarous devil claws. Watching this round was like watching a butcher easily dissecting animals. Lin Jian has blade intent, how could he have congealed it so quickly? A senior sage of bloody wood who was sitting on the platform muttered. This person is a good seedling. If he could preserve this mental state, then he will certainly achieve the unity of man and blade, very good. Lin Jian's display had surprisingly received recognition from many people sitting above the platform. The hearts of many new stars and Overlord level characters sunk slightly because of that. This was already the third follower of Li Yunmu who had appeared, and regardless of whether it was Demon, Barbarian New, or Blade Overlord, all of them had brought a subtle pressure to the onlookers. What stage then Li Yunmu himself would have matured to? The audience was yet to see him in action, but the performances of his three followers had brought everyone's gazes to him. But there was no reaction from Li Yunmu. He was standing within the group of Li Sek's other disciples with a spellbound expression on his face, wondering about something. He dared to be absent-minded during the continental battle? The cameras for live broadcast fell on Li Yunmu, who appeared to be in a daze at this moment. Dang, this Li Yunmu doesn't even need to be tested. All his followers are so ferocious, so he must be even more terrifying than them. I think his current strength should be on par with that of Zihanbei, Mantian, and these other super overlords. He should be the core representative of Li sect in this world, so it's no wonder, even people like Lin Jian and others want to become his followers. This Li sect really isn't simple. There was no longer anyone who doubted Li sect's existence. Everyone had realized that Li sect may not be necessarily a top-tier sect, but it was certainly a sect which couldn't be neglected because it possessed battle sage Jing, this mysterious quasi-deity. At this time, the stunning beauty flowing cloud who was standing at Li Yunmu's side lightly asked him, "Are you worrying about senior sister Li? She would certainly return. You have a point, I should trust her. She would certainly be rushing over." While he was in seclusion, Li Qinghong and the other three had separately entered the Tower of Glory. The other three had returned long ago, but Li Qinghong was still within the tower. There was no information regarding her, but Li Yunmu didn't believe that some accident would have happened to the person who was the most powerful among his four followers. His intuition told him that Li Qinghong wouldn't perish inside. But the number of people who had already taken the test continued to increase, and if Li Qinghong didn't enter the Black Dragon Island soon, she would be disqualified. Quickly look, it's finally Hai-Yu's turn. Suddenly, the Alliance's representative said the name of the holy daughter of Sea God's palace. She was one of the earliest to become an unhindered fluxer and was a person as famous as Mantian. When her turn came, she naturally attracted the attention of many people. Li Yunmu stopped worrying about this matter for the time being and turned his gaze to Hai-Yu. He clearly remembered that when he had entered the Tower of Glory the first time, Hai-Yu and Mantian had already entered the list on the tower stele. The two of them had obtained supreme glory by clearing the 20th level of the Tower of Glory with the lowest level of cultivation. And today, he finally got to see one of them. According to rumors, the strength of Sea God Palace's holy daughter is quite enigmatic. There are many who believe that Mantian is the stronger one among them, but I don't think so, said Demon, who seldom gave an earnest assessment of someone. This was the corporeal body strength test, which was unfair to Sea God's people, but this sort of excuse wasn't that important to people on the level of Hai-Yu. Demon was also a person of the sea, yet he had easily cleared the test, so then what to speak of the number one flux disciple of the Sea God Palace? Adorning an ocean blue gown, Hai-Yu entered the energy cover. Once inside, she calmly stood in one place, waiting for the 5 barbarous devil claws to be transferred over. After they were pushed inside, she slowly raised a hand towards the 5 beasts. Instantly, everyone's attention was captured by her snow-white hand. No one saw what she did, but her hand slowly began to generate waves of invisible energy towards the 5 barbarous devil claws. In front of these invisible energy waves, the beasts felt as if they were drowning. They kept struggling any way they could, even tried to pounce on her, but they were still trapped in the invisible quagmire. The aura of savageness around them began to dim, then disappeared completely. Dead. After a few minutes, the 5 barbarous devil claws died just like that, trapped within the formless energy waves. Most of the people didn't even know what sort of power this was. A shiver passed through Li Yunmu's heart, for this skill was similar to the ghostly image substitution which he cultivated. He could clearly sense movement in the void. Yu had only extended one hand, and she easily took the lives of the 5 savage beasts, without giving them any chance to retaliate. Good, this Yu has already grasped the deep ocean soul fragmentation of the sea god palace, an elder of frontline heaven exclaimed in admiration atop the platform. Perhaps only the people sitting there, above the others, knew what Yu had done. This was the first time someone had obtained everyone's unanimous approval. As for others like the people watching the live broadcast, they simply didn't know what Yu had done. Yet using this sort of unknown invisible power to kill the 5 formidable barbarous devil claws left people baffled. Yu had only extended one hand, but everyone, including even the ordinary people, could sense the strength of the number 1 flux disciple of Sea God Palace. Her power was deep and immeasurable. After her came S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue from the Snow Temple of the Central Continent, who was considered as a rare talent which appeared only once in every 100 years. S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue's way to pass the test was quite direct. She used the power of her heavenly world, trapping the 5 barbarous devil claws in the air, after which she waved her hand to collect all of them into her heavenly world. What sort of sorcery is this? Many people who didn't know about the heavenly worlds were completely dumbfounded. Yes, this was sorcery and not flux skills for those who weren't knowledgeable. She was doing magic in their eyes. Chapter 269, The Strongest Meatshield. S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue hadn't revealed any of her power during the test, but those with discerning eyes became aware that she must have congealed at least 2 suns in her heavenly world. Some of them even thought of an even more terrifying possibility, which was congealment of the 3rd sun. Although none of them dared to believe this was possible. Even if Snow Temple placed great importance on S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue, it would still be impossible for them to provide her with such an enormous amount of resources required to congeal the 3rd sun. People who possessed a heavenly world were clear on how many resources and time were required to congeal the 3rd sun. This task wasn't something a newcomer fluxer could accomplish, even with the help of an upper-tier sect like Snow Temple. Li Yunmu also wasn't willing to believe this, because he only had 1 sun in his heavenly world and nothing more. According to rumors, Zhanbei had congealed the 2nd sun, but he was already a monstrous entity who had been cultivating for a long time. However, the next instant, after an in-depth analysis and data comparison, the system informed Li Yunmu that there was a 70% possibility of S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue's heavenly world having congealed the 3rd sun. The system's reply gave Li Yunmu a big fright. Could it be that this S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue had been fooling everyone all along, and the reason why Snow Temple placed so much importance on her wasn't because of her extraordinary talent but because of some fateful encounter in her life, like congealing the 3rd sun or perhaps some other reserve? But then what sort of opportunity must it have been for S.H.A.D.O.W Qianxue so she would not only come in possession of an origin dimensional stone but also congeal the 3rd sun? A heavenly world with 3 suns? What level did that represent? According to Li Yunmu's knowledge, even the resources accumulated by several generations of the top clans of Heavenly Cloud City would only be equal to the number of resources required to reach this level and nothing more. From this, it was clear just how many resources were required to congeal the 3rd sun. As more and more test takers took their turn, the participant number crossed 700. 736th contestant, Central Continent Li Sex Li Yunmu. The Alliance representative's announcement stirred the entire Black Dragon Island. The online platforms were also in an uproar. Central Continent's Li Yunmu would finally take the stage. The attention heaped on him had increased by multiple folds by now, given that the mysterious Li Sex battle sage Jing had personally escorted him to Black Dragon Island. Furthermore, the performance of his followers had also made the new stars feel pressured. At this moment, many people were wondering about the level which the master had reached. For a while, people like Zhi Hanbei, Hai Yu, Man Tian, Xie Qianxue, Ji Wuxin, Zhongshan Onling, Mammoth Barbarian Wu Hang, and even Zhang Wei were slightly shaken and began to watch Li Yunmu's advancing figure with great attention. As for the group of people on the platform, they also couldn't help but spare some glances toward the energy cover. The mysterious Li sect had revealed their presence with battle sage and Jing appearing on the scene and displaying her might, which caused this group of people to view Li Yunmu's performance with importance. Soon, Li Yunmu entered the energy cover in the last few seconds of the 30-second time period. Haha, what arrogance, deliberately dragging to the last few moments to enter the energy cover, Zhang Wei sneered. But his junior apprentice sister Ji Wuxin, who was standing by his side, revealed a hint of confusion. Being the junior apprentice sister of Zhang Wei, she was quite clear about his personality. He wasn't a narrow-minded person, not to mention that he had already removed his heart's devil one, so there was no reason for him to show any hostility to Li Yunmu. Even if Li Yunmu was viewed as his replacement by the War God Temple, he shouldn't be acting this way. After all, being a senior disciple, why would he care about a rookie fluxer? The hint of hostility revealed by Zhang Wei perplexed her. But by then, the 5 barbarous devil claws had already appeared on the stage. These 5 extremely hungry beasts immediately pounced toward Li Yunmu, hungry for his flesh. Something that no one had expected happened then. Li Yunmu remained still, not bothering to move. This resulted in an uproar among the audience. Even though everyone had been astonished by the endless methods used by all the new formidable stars, but when they saw Li Yunmu's actions, they couldn't help but exclaim monster. That's right, Li Yunmu hadn't moved. He remained still at the exact place where he had been transferred, without caring for attacks of the 5 barbarous devil claws, whether it was biting, slashing, or slamming into him. The 5-dimensional beasts couldn't shake him in the slightest. One of the barbarous devil claws, driven to desperation by hunger, raised its exceptionally strong upper limb. Its incisive claw flickered coldly as it descended with viciousness against Li Yunmu's face. But this claw seemed to have attacked the world's toughest steel and was unable to cause any damage. Another devil claw ruthlessly pounced on Li Yunmu and bit his right leg with its sharp teeth. The next instant, 2 sets of teeth shattered to bits. 2 other barbarous devil claws slammed into Li Yunmu, but he didn't retreat even half a step, as if he was a several-meter-tall thick walls. This monster! Chu Qingyu had been given the chance to follow her clan to the Black Dragon Island to increase her experience. At this time, when she saw Li Yunmu, this thick-skinned person, and his powerful defense, or maybe she should better call it absolute defense now, she couldn't continue watching anymore. That guy's as shameless as ever, she thought, and clenched her teeth in anger. When she had encountered this Meatshield for the first time on the dimensional battlefield, she had been bullied by his thick tortoiseshell. And now, in front of the entire world, he was still using his tortoiseshell to bully others. This, impossible. When the 5 barbarous devil claws launched a torrent of attacks on Li Yunmu in a bout of madness and were still unable to harm him, a person in the audience rubbed his eyes to check that he wasn't seeing wrong. He then loudly cried out, "This defense!" When a sect master of an upper-tier sect saw Li Yunmu's terrifying defense from the platform, he was left speechless. Instantly, he became worried. If his disciples encountered Li Yunmu on the Black Dragon Mountain, would they be able to break his defense? Ridiculous, my god, he hasn't even activated his crystal armor. How is he holding up against the attacks of 5 barbarous devil claws just like that? The online platforms were in commotion. Given the suppression of flux energy, the contestants couldn't use their crystal armor. Yet, even so, the continuous attacks of the 5 barbarous devil claws were still unable to break Li Yunmu's defense. Chapter 270, Great Sun's Return. What level of tyrannical body was this? Not using any flux energy, not using heavenly world's energy, not using any energy shockwaves, is this still a corporeal body which a flux disciple can possess? Even the people above the platform couldn't remain composed anymore. Li Yunmu was just that unrivaled in defense. For the first time, he allowed people to understand one fact: when one's defense crosses a certain threshold, it becomes unrivaled. Man Tian looked startled, and Xie Hanbei revealed a shocked expression, while Jie displayed a hint of envy. Yue, Xie Qianxue, Ji Wuxin, and other female overlords displayed expressions as if they had been stung by a bee on the face. All the newly appeared formidable people had helplessness etched on their faces. Everyone was thinking the same thing: if they encountered such a person, what could they do? Everyone was earnestly trying to estimate the upper limit of Li Yunmu's defense, but their estimations still fell short. There wasn't any great reason for this, just that he hadn't even called out his crystal armor, but his defense was already deep and immeasurable. And according to rumors, he had congealed the highest grade 12 Rainbow Light King crystal armor. As long as people remembered this point, they immediately lost all hope. Only those who had strong willpower still kept on racking their brains for ways to break the tortoise shell. Zhao Mei, who had comprehended a terrifying knife-throwing technique, also stood with her brows puckered at this moment. Even if her knife-throwing technique was extremely swift, when used against someone like Li Yunmu, who had such abnormal defense and no weak points, she could deeply sense her powerlessness. Yang Chang'an, who possessed an extraordinary archery technique and was proficient in attacking another's weak points, was also having a headache. Same as Zhang Wei, on whose face solemnness could now be detected. No one had thought that after Li Yunmu showed up after more than a month, he would have matured to the point of causing headache to many people. 1 minute passed. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes passed. 30 minutes passed. However, Li Yunmu still remained in the same position, motionless. The 5 crazy barbarous devil claws lost all will to fight due to exhaustion from attacking him for a long time. They collapsed around him into puddles of mud. At this instant, they had lost all their savageness, and everyone even had an illusion that they were frail things. Instead of the most frightening dimensional monsters in the 5th dimension, they felt more like newborn kittens. For the first time, people experienced the meaning of the words: it doesn't matter whether you can beat your opponent as long as you can outlast him. Unrivaled defense. This was the true unrivaled defense. The Alliance representative decided to get involved in a battle for the first time. With a hint of helplessness on his face, he reminded Li Yunmu, there are still many participants left, I request you to clear the test quickly. Li Yunmu replied with an indifferent attitude. He remained within the energy cover, not moving in the slightest. Only after the Alliance representative reminded him 3 times, did this wastrel open his mouth. You've previously declared that every test has a time limit of 60 minutes. Only 30 minutes have passed now, so there's still a lot of time left. Lots of time left, your sister. Lots of time left, the Alliance representative grumbled inwardly. However, Li Yunmu's words were correct. The time limit for each test was 1 hour. The people who had determined the rules, how could they have thought that Li Yunmu would be such a scoundrel and abuse it? This scoundrel was extremely terrifying, or more like his abnormal flesh. Even after losing the protection of Flux Energy Crystal Armor, he still could freely take hits from the barbarous devil claws until they collapsed without suffering any damage. No one had thought that this was possible, and neither was there anyone who could repeat it, except this scoundrel. Thereupon, the test reached a strange phase, with Li Yunmu just dragging out the time. He remained standing inside without making any movements, while everyone on the Black Dragon Island could only keep spectating helplessly. On the online platform, there was a large commotion. Everyone kept unceasingly cursing Li Yunmu, but some people were still exclaiming in admiration at his unparalleled defense. Whether Li Yunmu was the strongest or not, no one could say that, but when it came to the title of Greatest Meatshield, everyone was clear to whom it belonged. Crap, even the plans he comes up with are crazy. This scoundrel Li Yunmu, how extraordinary is the strength of his flesh. He's just too beefy. Nice, this is the first time that I saw that after one's flesh reaches a certain stage, it becomes unparalleled. The people in the whole world kept waiting for the 60-minute time limit to be over without being able to do anything. To their surprise, Li Yunmu moved at the 47th minute. Quickly, look, he moved. Your sister, this wastrel finally became impatient and stood up. Li Yunmu's gaze was focused beyond the western coastline. A black dot had appeared there in the sky. As the black dot came closer, it continued to grow in size. It's her. Ling Shuang smiled faintly. She finally understood the reason why Li Yunmu was acting so shamelessly and dragging time in the energy cover. Li Qinghong, he was dragging time to wait for Li Qinghong. Some new rising stars also managed to notice the approaching figure. With the return of Li Qinghong, Li Yunmu finally breathed a sigh of relief. Sure enough, his intuition was correct. How could Li Qinghong perish within the Tower of Glory? She was the subordinate whom he was most optimistic about as well as the one he focused the most on. If she perished, then it would be quite regrettable. Good, it is now time to end this boring competition. Li Yunmu didn't look at Li Qinghong who was getting closer anymore. The next instant, a glowing red light suddenly radiated off his body. The red light continued to grow brighter and brighter, to the point that he looked like the scorching sun in the sky overhead. In the blink of an eye, no one could keep their eyes on him anymore. What's going on here? Great Sun Consummate Realm. At this instant, the senior domain sages on the platform as well as the quasi-deities couldn't help but stand up to take a look. As for Chao Tiansek's sect master, his complexion had turned ashen. The Flux sages could, naturally, see Li Yunmu spitting out the red sun, even through the cover of the red light. The red sun's light instantly covered the entire energy cover. The scorching sun fell apart as quickly as it appeared. While most of the people had their eyes closed because of the brightness stabbing their pupils, Li Yunmu swallowed back the red sun. Once the red light fell apart, the 5 barbarous devil claws within the energy cover had disappeared. Li Yunmu had also disappeared, because he had already come out of the energy cover. Inside it, everything seemed to have been roasted by a high temperature, and cracks spread through the ground. This isn't possible. How could he still use flux energy while being suppressed by the energy cover?